before I called Dr. Sikorsky to the stand, may I set up the court for use of a demonstrative?
Yeah.
And I'd just like to ask opposing counsel if it is okay if we use their demonstrative stand.
That's fine.
Thank you. That out of the way, Your Honor, the state is ready to call its second witness, Dr. Patricia Sikorsky, to the stand. Good afternoon.
Good
Would you
afternoon.
introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Dr. Patricia Sikorsky.
What do you do for a living, doctor?
I'm a criminalist or a forensic scientist for the Midlands Criminalistics Laboratory. I gather evidence, run tests on those evidence, make a conclusion, and then attempt to construct a narrative of events.
And what education have you received in order to qualify you for that position at the lab?
I have a bachelor's in chemistry from Marshall University, and I have 2 PhDs, one in chemistry, one in biology, both from Washington University.
And apart from that formal education, do you have any other experience in the field of forensics or forensic analysis?
Yes, I am an adjunct professor at Midland State University, and I've worked at the crime lab for 15 years.
And what is your role testifying in today's trial?
I was part of the team that executed the search warrant on Chase Covington's home, and I gathered evidence, as I said, and we found a briefcase.
When you took that briefcase back to your lab to run your standard battery of tests, did you have sufficient facts and data to analyze?
Yes, as I said, that briefcase, it ended up yielding a lot of information from fingerprints, DNA, and stain.
And in the field of forensic analysis, are there reliable scientific tests that you can apply to an object like the briefcase you collected?
Yes, I did fingerprint analysis, touch DNA analysis, mitochondrial DNA analysis, and then gas chromatography mass spectrometry.
And specifically with the briefcase you collected, were you successful at applying those scientific tests to that briefcase?
Yes, I've done them the same way I have for 15 years at the crime lab and the same way I teach my students.
Thank you, Doctor. I'd like to move on to the specifics of your analysis. Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness with State's Exhibit 5, or I'm approaching opposing counsel first with State's Exhibit 5. Would Your Honor like a courtesy copy of the same document? Doctor, would you tell the court what I've just handed you?
This is the briefcase we found or that was given to me on, that was taken from Chase Covington's person on the time of his arrest.
Does that photograph appear to accurately depict the briefcase at the time you tested it?
Yep, it's the same one.
Your Honor, I move to admit State's Exhibit 5 into evidence.
No objections.
May I approach the witness to retrieve and tender evidence?
Yeah,
Or-
just keep the copy, yeah.
And may Dr. Sikorsky step down to use a demonstrative of State's Exhibit 5. So would you please describe the briefcase to the court that you analyzed?
It's a simple black business briefcase with a black interior and 2 latches and a handle.
So what was the first test you conducted on the outside of that briefcase?
On the exterior of the briefcase, I performed fingerprint analysis.
Can you tell the court a little bit more about how you conducted that test?
Yes, I dusted the exterior with a magnetic powder, and wherever you touch a surface with your fingertip, it leaves oils behind from the creases of your fingerprint. And that powder will clump together where those oils were left behind. It'll then leave a pattern, which you take a picture of, and you will upload it to a computer for analysis and identification.
And after that process, were you able to positively identify any fingerprints on that briefcase?
Yes, I found 6 fingerprints, 2 on the edges of the briefcase, both belonging to Avery Bancroft. 1 on this right latch, the right index finger of Avery Bancroft, and 3 on the handle, 1 from the index finger of Avery Bancroft, and 2 from the ring and middle finger of Chase Covington.
Were you able to uncover any fingerprints on the latches of the briefcase?
Yes, I was able to find one, as I said, on the right latch. However, on the left latch, there was a smudge.
What do you mean when you say a smudge, Doctor?
The powder clumped together there, so I knew somebody had touched the surface. However, the pattern was too irregular to be classified as a fingerprint, so I moved on to my touch DNA analysis.
Thank you, Doctor. You may retake your seat for now. So, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what a touch DNA analysis test is that you've used to analyze that smudge you found on the latch?
Yes, touch DNA analysis is a mitochondrial DNA analysis. So when you touch a surface, some bodily fluids are left behind, such as saliva and mucus that are left on the dead skin cells. And we analyze the mucus and the saliva on those dead skin cells in order to identify a person.
And what is your process for running that test in the lab?
Well, I break down the DNA. Basically, I unwind the double helix. And then I regrow the non-coding strand, which is the DNA. And I break it down again for identification.
And Doctor, after running that process, what were you able to conclude about the smudge on the latch?
The smudge on the left latch of the briefcase belonged to Avery Bancroft.
Thank you, Doctor. Did you conduct any further series of tests, maybe on the inside of the briefcase?
Yes, in the interior of the briefcase I found 5 hairs. And I ran, again, a mitochondrial DNA analysis on those hairs.
And how did you conduct this mitochondrial DNA test on the hairs?
Well, normally you look for the root of the hair, which contains nuclear DNA. However, there were no roots left on those hairs, so I had to do mitochondrial DNA analysis. And it's similar to the one I mentioned before with the smudge. You break down the DNA, grow the DNA, and then break down the DNA again for identification.
Were there any other tests that you did on those hairs?
Oh yes, I also did a light microscopy test on the hairs. And you're basically just comparing them to known samples. You're looking for characteristics such as curly versus straight, width, color, etc.
And based on those two tests, what can you conclude about the origin of those hairs?
All 5 of the hairs came from the head of Avery Bancroft.
Did you find anything else in the briefcase that you tested?
Yes, I found a fragrant stain on the interior fabric of the briefcase. And I did a gas chromatography mass spectrometry test on that hair, or on that stain, I'm sorry.
And how did you conduct that gas stain testing in your lab, Doctor?
Well, I cut out the stain, and I put it in an oven, and I baked the stain and injected a gas to separate it from the fabric. And then I took the speed of that gas, and I also electrically charged it so I could count its charge.
And based on that, were you able to reach any definite conclusions about that fragrance stain you found?
Yes, I was. As I mentioned before, it was a fragrant stain, so we collected samples from the homes of Chase Covington and Avery Bancroft, and I was able to match it to a perfume from the home of Avery Bancroft called La Nuit de Warahay, or Warahay.
Doctor, at the beginning of this direct, you mentioned that part of your job at the Criminalistics Laboratory entails creating a forensic narrative of events based on all the evidence you collect in the case. So would you be able to give us the forensic narrative of the events of today's case?
Yes, we know for certain that at some point Avery Bancroft had touched the exterior of the briefcase and the latches of that briefcase. We also know that Avery Bancroft either came into contact with or was in close proximity to the interior of the briefcase at some point. And we know that Chase Covington also touched the exterior of the briefcase, which makes sense since it was found on his person at the time of his arrest.
Thank you, Doctor. I have nothing further, Your Honors. Would opposing counsel like me to take down the monster or leave it up?
You leave it up.